It was my sister's wedding day, a grand event in every sense of the word. Glittering chandeliers, rows of extravagant floral arrangements, and an audience dressed to the nines made it clear that no expense had been spared. I stood awkwardly in a corner, clutching a glass of water, trying my best to stay invisible in a sea of designer gowns and tailored suits. My parents had made it very clear that I didn't belong in this glittering spectacle of perfection. "You're lucky we even let you attend," my mother hissed under her breath earlier that day as I slipped into a simple dress. "We didn't want you embarrassing us in front of our guests." Her words stung, but I swallowed the pain. My parents had always been critical, but today, their contempt felt sharper. It wasn't just their disapproval. It was the outright humiliation that awaited me as the evening unfolded. The moment came during the wedding toast. My father took the microphone, standing tall and confident, and began to speak. "Today, we celebrate our beautiful daughter, Victoria," he said, his voice ringing with pride. "She has always made us proud, unlike." His gaze swept toward me, and I froze, every nerve in my body screaming for me to disappear. "Unlike some people in this family who have done nothing but bring us shame." The room fell silent, save for a few gasps from the crowd. My cheeks burned as every pair of eyes turned toward me. It was a public flogging, one designed to remind everyone in the room of my failure in their eyes. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, but I refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing me cry. Instead, I clenched my fists and looked away, focusing on a distant point in the room as my father continued his toast, praising my sister's achievements while throwing more veiled insults my way. I wanted to run, but my feet felt like lead. Then I heard his voice, strong, calm, and cutting through the tension like a blade. "That's enough." The crowd parted as Liam stepped forward. He was dressed in a sharp black suit, his presence commanding and undeniable. My heart raced as he approached, his jaw set in a way that told me he wasn't about to let this slide. "Who are you to interrupt this?" my father snapped, his face flushed with anger. "I'm the man who loves your daughter," Liam replied, his voice steady but laced with an unmistakable edge. "And I'm here to make something very clear." The room was deathly quiet. Everyone, from the servers to the socialites, was watching intently. Liam stepped up to the stage, taking the microphone from my father's stunned grip. "You call her a disgrace," he said, his voice echoing in the vast hall. "But let me tell you what I see. I see a woman who's strong, resilient, and far better than any of you give her credit for." The murmurs began, but Liam wasn't finished. "You belittle her, humiliate her, but you don't see the heart she has or the kindness she shows to people who actually deserve it. You don't deserve her, and frankly, your behavior tonight is more of a disgrace than anything she's ever done." Couldn't breathe. The weight of years of silent suffering lifted with every word Liam spoke. My parents looked furious, my sister mortified, but for the first time I didn't care. Then Liam did something no one expected. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. He dropped to one knee, right there in the middle of the hall with every guest watching. "I love you," he said, looking up at me with a sincerity that brought fresh tears to my eyes. "And I don't care what they think. Will you marry me?" The room erupted into chaos. Gasps, cheers, and even protests from my parents, but none of it mattered. In that moment, all I could see was Liam, the man who stood up for me when no one else did. "Yes," I whispered, my voice shaking. 1,000 times, yes. The rest of the night was a blur. Liam's bold declaration had flipped the narrative, turning the focus from my parents' cruelty to the unexpected romance unfolding before their eyes. People who had looked at me with pity earlier now approached with congratulations, their shallow approval ringing hollow in my ears. But I didn't need their validation anymore. For the first time in my life, I felt free. That night marked the beginning of a new chapter. But it wasn't just a love story. It was a declaration of my worth, a reminder that I didn't need my parents' approval to be happy. And as for my parents, well, let's just say their desperate pleas for forgiveness would come sooner than I expected. The moment Liam slipped the ring onto my finger, the crowd erupted. Some cheered, others whispered behind their hands, but the deafening silence from my parents was what stood out the most. My mother's face was a mask of fury, her lips pressed so tightly together they turned white. My father, on the other hand, looked like he had been slapped in public, an expression of disbelief and barely contained rage. Liam stood, his hand firmly holding mine as he turned to face them. "It's clear you don't value her," he said, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "But I do, and that's all that matters." "Get out," my father barked, his voice trembling with anger. "You've embarrassed this family enough for one evening." Liam chuckled, his confidence unshaken. "Embarrassed? No, sir. I think you've managed that all on your own. I just gave her what she's always deserved. Respect." Before my father could respond, Liam pulled me toward the exit, his grip firm yet comforting. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, and I felt a surge of power walking alongside him. For years, I had been the invisible daughter, the one cast into shadows while my sister basked in the spotlight. But tonight, Liam had made sure the world saw me, and not as a disgrace, but as someone worthy of love. When we finally left the venue, I was too overwhelmed to speak. Liam drove us to his apartment, a cozy space that felt more like home than my parents' mansion ever did. He handed me a glass of wine and sat beside me on the couch, his hand resting on mine. "Talk to me," he said softly. "How are you feeling?" "I don't even know," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "Part of me is relieved, but another part of me, I can't believe they did that. In front of everyone." Liam's eyes darkened with anger. "They've treated you like this for too long. Tonight was just the breaking point." I nodded, tears welling up again. "I don't know how to move forward from this. They're my parents, but how do you forgive something like that?" "You don't have to," Liam said firmly. "Forgiveness isn't something you owe them. You have every right to cut toxic people out of your life, even if they're family." His words lingered in my mind long after we went to bed. For the first time, I started to consider the possibility of a life without their constant criticism. A life where I could finally be myself without fear of judgment. The next morning, my phone was flooded with messages. Most were from extended family members offering hollow apologies or trying to justify my parents' behavior. But the one message that caught my attention was from my sister, Victoria. "We need to talk. Meet me at the cafe on 5th at noon." Reluctantly, I agreed. When I arrived, Victoria was already seated, her usual air of confidence replaced by something that looked suspiciously like guilt. "I want to start by saying I'm sorry," she began, her hands clasped tightly around her coffee cup. "I didn't know they were going to do that. If I had, I would have stopped them." I raised an eyebrow. "Really? Because you've never exactly stood up for me before." Her face flushed. "I know, and I'm not proud of it. But last night, even I was shocked. It wasn't fair to you." I crossed my arms, leaning back in my chair. "Why now? Why apologize after years of letting them treat me like I'm less than you?" Victoria hesitated, her gaze dropping to the table. "Because I realized something last night. No matter how much they've praised me, no matter how many times they've called me the perfect daughter, it doesn't mean anything if it comes at the expense of my sister." Her words caught me off guard, but I wasn't ready to forgive her just yet. "You're only saying this because Liam embarrassed them in front of everyone. If he hadn't, would you still be sitting here?" Victoria flinched, and I knew I'd hit a nerve. "Maybe not," she admitted. "But does it matter? I'm here now, and I want to make things right." I wasn't sure if I could trust her, but a small part of me wanted to believe she was sincere. "You have a lot to prove," I said finally. "Apologies are easy. Actions aren't." She nodded, her expression somber. "I understand. Just give me a chance, okay?" Over the next few weeks, Victoria's actions began to match her words. She started standing up to our parents, calling them out when they tried to demean me, and even reached out to Liam to thank him for what he did at the wedding. Meanwhile, my parents remained stubbornly silent. They didn't reach out, didn't apologize, nothing. It was as if they were hoping the whole situation would blow over, that I would crawl back to them like I always had. But this time I was determined to stand my ground. Weeks passed without a word from my parents. Their silence, though predictable, still stung. I couldn't shake the sense of being abandoned. Even if I had finally begun to accept that their love came with strings I was no longer willing to untangle. Liam, as always, was my anchor. He supported me through the whirlwind of emotions that followed the wedding, his unwavering presence reminding me that I wasn't alone. Still, a part of me yearned for closure, an apology, an acknowledgement, something from the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. That closure came sooner than expected, though not in the way I'd hoped. One evening, as Liam and I were settling in for dinner, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from my father. "We need to talk. Come home tomorrow. Noon." My stomach churned as I stared at the screen. There was no apology, no warmth, just a curt demand. Liam leaned over, reading the message, and frowned. "You don't have to go," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "You don't owe them anything." "I know," I replied, my voice trembling. "But I need to hear what they have to say, even if it's just to confirm that walking away was the right decision." The next day, I arrived at my parents' house feeling like I was walking into a lion's den. The grand, cold mansion loomed above me as I stepped out of my car, memories of countless humiliations and criticisms flooding back with every step I took toward the door. My mother opened it, her expression unreadable. "You're late," she said, her tone sharp as ever. I bit back a retort and followed her into the living room, where my father was waiting. He sat in his usual chair, his posture stiff and his face set in a scowl. Victoria was there too, seated on the couch with a wary look on her face. "We wanted to discuss what happened at the wedding," my father began, his tone clipped. "Your behavior was unacceptable." "My behavior?" I blinked, stunned. "Are you serious right now?" I said, my voice rising. "You publicly humiliated me in front of all your guests, and you think my behavior was the problem? You disrespected this family by allowing that man to speak out of turn." My mother interjected, her voice cold. "And then to accept his proposal without even consulting us? Do you have any idea how that made us look?" "Made you look?" I repeated, incredulous. "This isn't about you. This is about how you've treated me my entire life. I've been nothing but an afterthought to you, a scapegoat for your frustrations while Victoria got all the praise." "That's not true," my father snapped. "We've always treated you fairly." I laughed bitterly. "Fairly? Is that what you call it? Publicly calling me a disgrace at my sister's wedding? That's fair." Victoria, to my surprise, spoke up. "She's right," she said quietly. "What you did was wrong. You crossed a line." My parents turned to her, stunned. "You're taking her side?" my mother asked, her voice dripping with disbelief. "It's not about sides," Victoria said, her voice gaining strength. "It's about admitting that you went too far. You owe her an apology." My father's face darkened. "I don't owe her anything," he said, his tone final. "She's been a disappointment since the day she was born." His words hit me like a physical blow, but this time I didn't break. Instead, I stood, my hands shaking with anger. "Thank you for making it clear where I stand in this family," I said, my voice trembling but resolute. "I don't need your approval, and I certainly don't need your toxic version of love." I turned to leave, but before I reached the door, Victoria called after me. "Wait, I'm coming with you." Victoria's decision to leave with me was as shocking as it was validating. As we drove away from the house, she explained her reasoning. "I've spent my whole life trying to live up to their expectations," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "But no matter how much they praise me, it's never enough. Watching how they treated you made me realize something. This isn't love. It's control. And I don't want any part of it anymore." Her words brought a lump to my throat. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't alone in my fight to break free from our parents' suffocating grasp. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of change. Victoria moved into a small apartment across the street from Liam and me, and our relationship began to heal. She apologized again, this time with a sincerity that left no room for doubt. Slowly, I started to let go of the resentment I'd harbored for so long. Liam, ever the supportive partner, encouraged me to focus on my passions, something I'd always been too afraid to pursue. With his help, I enrolled in a design course, a small step toward reclaiming my sense of purpose and identity. As I began to rebuild my life, my parents' attempts to regain control became more desperate. They sent letters, messages, even tried to involve other family members to guilt me into returning. But their efforts only strengthened my resolve. The turning point came when they showed up unannounced at Liam's apartment. What followed was a final, explosive confrontation that forced everyone to confront the ugly truth about our family dynamic. It was a quiet Sunday morning. Liam and I were enjoying a rare moment of peace, sipping coffee on the balcony, when the knock on the door shattered the tranquility. I glanced at Liam, confused. We weren't expecting anyone. When Liam opened the door, there they were, my parents. My father stood rigid, his expression stern, while my mother wore her signature mask of faux politeness. Behind them, 2 large suitcases sat on the ground, making their intent clear. They hadn't come for a casual visit. They were here to intrude. "What are you doing here?" I asked, stepping into the doorway, my voice tight with anger. "We need to talk," my father said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "You've made some very poor decisions lately, and we're here to fix this mess." Liam crossed his arms, his protective stance beside me unwavering. "She doesn't need you to fix anything," he said coolly. "She's doing just fine without your interference." My mother scoffed, her eyes narrowing at Liam. "You're the reason she's spiraling out of control," she spat. "You've poisoned her against us." I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. "Enough," I said firmly. "If you're here to lecture me or blame Liam, you can leave now." "We're here because we care about you," my father said, though his tone carried more authority than affection. "You're making a mistake cutting us out of your life. We're family." "Family?" I repeated, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Is that what you call public humiliation and years of criticism? Because that's not my definition of family." "You're being overly dramatic," my mother snapped. "You've always been so sensitive." "That's because you've always been so cruel," I shot back. "You think you can show up here and guilt me into coming back? It's not going to happen." Liam stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "You don't get to come here and dictate her life anymore," he said. "She's not a child, and she doesn't owe you anything." My father's face turned red, his anger bubbling to the surface. "You have no right to speak to me that way, and you have no right to treat her like this," Liam countered. "You've spent years tearing her down, and now you're surprised she's finally standing up for herself?" I could see the frustration in my parents' eyes. They weren't used to being challenged, especially not by someone they considered an outsider. But Liam wasn't backing down, and neither was I. "You need to leave," I said, my voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside me. "I've made my decision, and nothing you say will change it." My parents didn't leave quietly. As they packed their bags back into the car, my mother hurled one final barb. "Don't come crawling back to us when he leaves you. You'll regret this." Her words stung, but I refused to let them see it. "I won't regret choosing happiness over your approval," I said, my voice unwavering. "Goodbye." As they drove away, I felt a strange mix of emotions, relief, sadness, and an overwhelming sense of liberation. For the first time, I had drawn a line they couldn't cross. With my parents finally out of the picture, I focused on the people who truly mattered. Victoria had become an unexpected ally, and her support was instrumental as I navigated this new chapter of my life. One evening, as we sat on her balcony overlooking the city, she opened up about her own struggles with our parents. "I always felt like I had to be perfect," she admitted, her voice tinged with sadness. "They made me believe that if I didn't meet their expectations, I wasn't worthy of their love." Her confession brought tears to my eyes. "I always thought you were their favorite," I said softly. "I wasn't their favorite," she replied. "I was their project. And now I see how much it cost me. And you." Our bond deepened as we shared stories and supported each other. For the first time, I felt like I had a sister, not a rival. The months that followed were transformative. I threw myself into my design course, discovering a passion I never knew I had. Liam was my biggest cheerleader, always encouraging me to dream bigger and aim higher. One night, As we sat on the couch going over my latest project, he turned to me with a serious expression. "You've come so far," he said. "I'm so proud of you." His words brought a lump to my throat. "I couldn't have done it without you," I admitted. "You didn't need me," he said, smiling. "You've always had this strength in you. You just needed to see it for yourself." While my life was moving forward, there was still a lingering sense of unfinished business with my parents. Though I had no intention of letting them back into my life, I felt the need to confront the pain they had caused one last time. Victoria offered to come with me, and together we planned a meeting that would finally lay everything on the table. The decision to meet my parents one last time wasn't an easy one. Every fiber of my being screamed to leave the past buried, but I knew I needed closure. Not for them, but for myself. Victoria insisted on coming with me, her presence a silent promise that I wouldn't face this battle alone. We arranged to meet at a neutral location, a quiet cafe far from the familiarity of their mansion. The setting was ordinary, but the tension in the air was anything but. When my parents arrived, their expressions were unreadable, though my father's jaw was set in the way I recognized as barely concealed anger. We sat down, an uneasy silence stretching between us. Finally, my father spoke. "So what is this about?" he asked, his tone clipped. "This is about the damage you've done," I said, my voice steady but firm. "And it's about letting you know that I'm done being the punching bag in this family." My mother scoffed, leaning back in her chair. "Is that what you think? That we've been cruel to you?" "I don't think it," I replied sharply. "I know it. You've spent my entire life making me feel like I wasn't good enough, like I was a disappointment. And at Victoria's wedding, you made sure the whole world knew it." "That's not how we saw it," my father said, his tone defensive. "We were frustrated. Yes, but we've always had your best interests at heart." "Best interests?" Victoria interjected, her voice incredulous. "You humiliated her in front of hundreds of people. How is that in her best interests?" My mother's eyes flicked to Victoria, her surprise evident. "You're taking her side?" "I'm taking the side of what's right," Victoria shot back. "You've spent years pitting us against each other, and I won't be part of it anymore." For a moment, my parents were silent, clearly taken aback by Victoria's defiance. Then my father leaned forward, his expression softening just enough to seem genuine. "We didn't realize you felt this way," he said. "We only wanted the best for you." "That's not true," I said, refusing to let him manipulate the conversation. "You wanted control. You wanted perfection. And when I didn't fit your mold, you decided I wasn't worth your love." My mother's lips thinned, but she didn't deny it. "You always misunderstood us," she said finally. "We only pushed you because we saw potential." "You pushed me because you wanted a version of me that didn't exist," I corrected. "And in doing so, you destroyed any chance of us having a real relationship." The conversation continued, each word peeling back layers of unresolved pain. Victoria and I stood united, refusing to let them deflect or minimize their actions. By the end of the meeting, my parents were visibly shaken, their confidence eroded by the weight of the truths we had laid bare. "We're not asking for your forgiveness," I said as I stood to leave. "We're asking for you to take responsibility for what you've done. If you're willing to do that, maybe one day we can rebuild something. But until then, this is goodbye." Walking out of that cafe felt like shedding a weight I'd carried my entire life. For the first time, I felt free, not just from their expectations, but from the fear of losing their approval. Victoria and I walked in silence for a while before she finally spoke. "That was brave," she said. "I don't think I could have done that without you." "You're stronger than you think," I said, smiling at her. "We both are." The weeks following that meeting were transformative. Without the shadow of my parents' judgment looming over me, I threw myself into my work and my relationships. My design course became a source of pride, and with Liam's encouragement, I began freelancing for small businesses, creating logos and branding that allowed me to showcase my creativity. Victoria, too, was finding her footing. She started therapy, something neither of us had ever considered growing up in a family that viewed vulnerability as weakness. Slowly, she began to heal from the pressures of perfectionism, and our bond grew stronger with each passing day. Surprisingly, the fallout from the confrontation brought unexpected allies. Extended family members who had witnessed my parents' behavior reached out, offering apologies for not stepping in sooner. While their words didn't erase the past, they served as a reminder that I wasn't alone. One evening, as Liam and I sat on the balcony watching the sunset, he turned to me with a smile that made my heart skip a beat. "You've come so far," he said, his voice full of pride. "I think it's time we start building our future." I laughed, glancing at the ring already on my finger. "I thought we already were." "I mean officially," he said, pulling out a second ring. This one a simple band with our initials engraved inside. "Let's set a date." Tears filled my eyes as I nodded. "Yes, let's." The announcement of our wedding plans brought a new wave of emotions. While my parents remained distant, Victoria stepped into the role of maid of honor with enthusiasm, determined to make the day a celebration of love and resilience. The months leading up to the wedding were a whirlwind of excitement, nerves, and unexpected moments of healing. Victoria threw herself into her role as maid of honor, helping with everything from venue selection to dress fittings. Each step felt like reclaiming a piece of my life that I thought had been lost forever. One evening, as we sorted through color palettes and floral arrangements, she turned to me with a hesitant smile. "You know," she began, "I've always envied you." I blinked, caught off guard. "Me? What's there to envy?" "You've always been real," she said, her voice soft. "You didn't pretend to be someone you're not, even when it meant standing alone. I've spent my whole life trying to be perfect for them, and all it got me was emptiness." Her confession broke my heart. I reached out, squeezing her hand. "You don't have to be perfect anymore," I said. "We're free now." As the guest list grew, the inevitable question arose. Should we invite my parents? Liam, ever the voice of reason, left the decision to me. "It's your day," he said, his hand resting gently on mine. "If you want them there, we'll make it work. If not, that's okay too." After days of deliberation, I decided to send them an invitation. Not as a gesture of forgiveness, but as a way to offer them one last chance to show they cared. Whether they accepted or not would speak volumes about where they stood. 2 weeks before the wedding, I received a reply from my parents. It wasn't a phone call or a heartfelt letter, just a cold, formal RSVP confirming their attendance. I couldn't help but wonder if they were coming out of genuine remorse or a desire to save face. Victoria, ever the optimist, tried to see the silver lining. "Maybe this is their way of trying," she suggested. "Even if it's not perfect, it's a step." I nodded, though my heart remained guarded. The wounds they'd inflicted were still fresh, and I wasn't ready to trust them just yet. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear, the perfect backdrop for the most important day of my life. As I stood in front of the mirror, dressed in a gown that made me feel like a queen, a wave of emotions washed over me. I thought about the girl I'd been, the one who felt invisible, unworthy, and marveled at how far I'd come. Victoria entered the room, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "You look amazing," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "So do you," I replied, taking in her elegant maid of honor dress. "Thank you for being here. For everything." She smiled, pulling me into a tight hug. "You deserve this happiness," she whispered. "Don't ever forget that." The ceremony was everything I dreamed of. Intimate, heartfelt, and filled with love. As I walked down the aisle toward Liam, I felt a sense of peace I'd never known before. He stood there, his eyes filled with unwavering love, and I knew I was exactly where I was meant to be. But the reception brought its own challenges. My parents arrived late, their presence casting a shadow over an otherwise perfect day. They kept their distance, watching from the sidelines as Liam and I shared our first dance, their expressions unreadable. When they finally approached, it was during a quiet moment as Liam and I stood by the balcony, taking in the view. My father cleared his throat, drawing my attention. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice uncharacteristically soft. "Thank you," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. There was an awkward pause before my mother spoke. "We wanted to say, we're sorry for everything." Her words caught me off guard. I searched her face for sincerity and saw a flicker of something that looked like genuine regret. I appreciate that, I said slowly, but words aren't enough. If you truly want to make amends, it's going to take time and effort. They both nodded, their expressions somber. We understand, my father said, and we're willing to try if you'll let us. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of laughter, dancing, and heartfelt toasts. My parents kept their distance, respecting my boundaries, while Victoria shone as the life of the party. Liam's family embraced me wholeheartedly, their warmth and acceptance filling the void my parents had left behind. As the night drew to a close, Liam and I stood on the dance floor, surrounded by friends and family who had become our true support system. He leaned in, his forehead resting against mine. This is just the beginning, he whispered. Our beginning. I smiled, my heart swelling with love and gratitude. I can't wait to see where it takes us, and as the music played and the stars glittered above, I knew I had finally found my happily ever after. Not just in Liam, but in myself. It was a sweltering summer afternoon when the pristine glass doors of the Sapphire Crest Hotel swung open, revealing a young woman who didn't look like she belonged to the opulent world surrounding her. Her worn sneakers squeaked against the marble floor as she approached the grand reception desk. Her name was Emily. She carried herself with quiet confidence despite her modest appearance. A simple sundress, a faded backpack slung over her shoulder, and strands of blonde hair sticking to her face from the heat. The receptionist, Amanda, a sharp-featured woman with a razor-sharp tongue, took one look at Emily and smirked. Her tailored suit and air of superiority were weapons she wielded with precision. This girl, Amanda thought, didn't belong here. The Sapphire Crest wasn't just any hotel. It was a sanctuary for the elite, a haven for the wealthy, and a fortress against the common folk. Emily stepped up to the counter and smiled politely. Hi, I'd like to check in, please. Amanda arched a perfectly manicured brow, her tone laced with condescension. Are you sure you're in the right place, sweetheart? The budget motel is a couple of blocks down. Emily's cheeks flushed, but she stood her ground. I'm in the right place. I have a reservation. Amanda sighed dramatically, flipping through her computer with an exaggerated show of reluctance. Name? Emily Brooks. Amanda's fingers clicked against the keyboard. A frown creased her forehead as she scanned the screen. We don't have an Emily Brooks listed here. Are you sure you made the reservation? You know, sometimes people dream big and think they can afford places like this. Emily's patience thinned. I made the reservation, and I have the confirmation email if you'd like to see it. Amanda waved a dismissive hand. Email confirmation means nothing. Anyone can fake one. Let's be real here, you're not exactly our usual clientele. Why don't you save yourself the embarrassment and leave? The humiliation burned hot in Emily's chest. She dug into her backpack, pulled out her phone, and thrust it toward Amanda. Here, check it yourself. Amanda didn't even glance at the phone. Instead, she leaned in, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. Honey, this is the Sapphire Crest. Do you even know how much one night here costs? We don't let just anyone walk in off the street. Emily's hand trembled, not from fear but from the sheer frustration of being judged. She opened her mouth to retort when a sharp voice cut through the tension. What's going on here? Both women turned. A man in his late 40s, dressed impeccably in a tailored suit, strode toward them. His presence commanded attention, and Amanda immediately straightened, her demeanor flipping into one of forced politeness. Mr. Carter, Amanda chirped. There's been a little misunderstanding. Emily froze. The man standing before her was her father, Jacob Brooks. Though their relationship had always been complicated, he owned the Sapphire Crest, and she knew he wouldn't stand for this treatment. Jacob's piercing blue eyes locked onto Amanda. Misunderstanding? Amanda hesitated. This young woman claims she has a reservation, but as you can see, she gestured toward Emily with a sneer. She's clearly mistaken. Jacob turned his gaze to Emily. Recognition flashed in his eyes, but he said nothing that revealed their connection. Instead, he simply asked, Do you have a reservation, miss? Emily nodded, her voice firm. Yes, I do. Under the name Emily Brooks. Jacob gave a small nod. Then it seems there's no issue. Amanda, check her in. Amanda's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. But, Mr. Carter, she... Now, Jacob commanded, his tone brooking no argument. Amanda reluctantly began typing, her face a mask of resentment. Fine. A single room, I assume? Jacob interjected. No, she'll have one of our suites. Amanda's head snapped up, her eyes wide with disbelief. A suite? Yes, Amanda. Is that a problem? Amanda swallowed hard. No, of course not. As Amanda handed over the key card with trembling fingers, Emily took it, her head held high. She didn't need to say anything. Her silence was louder than words. She turned and walked away, her step steady, but her heart raced with a mix of triumph and fury. This was only the beginning. Emily wasn't going to let this insult slide. Not because of her own pride, but because she knew she had to expose the rot beneath the surface of places like this. People like Amanda thrived on unchecked power, and Emily had spent her life watching her father build his empire without understanding the cost to those trampled underfoot. As Emily entered the grand suite, her resolve solidified. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about setting things right. But she wasn't prepared for what would come next. The skeletons she'd uncover, the alliances she'd form, and the high-stakes battle that would unfold, shaking the Sapphire Crest Hotel to its core. Emily paced the lavish suite, her fingers brushing against the silken curtains, the polished wooden furniture, and the marble countertop of the minibar. The sheer extravagance of the room was a stark reminder of her father's empire, a world she had purposely distanced herself from. But now, she was back, and the fire in her chest demanded action. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen to see a text from her best friend. Mia, how's the hotel? You okay? Emily quickly typed back. It's complicated, but I'm not leaving until I fix this. Emily descended the grand staircase, her head held high. The lobby buzzed with activity. Businessmen barking into phones, tourists gawking at the chandeliers, and staff flitting about in hushed efficiency. Amanda stood at the reception desk, her posture stiff, her lips pursed into a thin line. Emily approached her like a storm brewing on the horizon. Good morning, Emily said, her tone cool but edged with steel. Amanda looked up, the fake smile plastered across her face barely concealing her disdain. Oh, it's you. Enjoying your stay? Immensely, Emily replied. I'd like to speak with the manager. Amanda's smile faltered. Mr. Carter is very busy. Emily leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper. Then tell him his daughter is here. Amanda froze, her eyes darting toward the office door. Daughter? Emily crossed her arms, waiting. Amanda stammered out an apology before disappearing into the office. Moments later, Jacob emerged, his expression unreadable. Emily, he said, his voice steady. Let's talk somewhere private. In his office, Jacob gestured for Emily to sit, but she remained standing. The tension between them crackled like static electricity. What are you doing here? He asked, leaning against his desk. Trying to enjoy a vacation, Emily replied. But your staff had other ideas. Jacob sighed. I'll handle Amanda. She'll apologize. Emily's laugh was bitter. This isn't just about her. It's about everything, the way people like her treat others because they think they can. The way this place thrives on exclusivity while stomping on anyone who doesn't fit the mold. Jacob's jaw tightened. You don't understand how the business works, Emily. We cater to a specific clientele. And that gives your staff the right to humiliate people? She shot back. You've built a palace for the rich and powerful. But at what cost? Jacob ran a hand through his hair, frustration etched across his face. What do you want me to do? Let me work here, Emily said suddenly. Jacob blinked. What? You heard me. I want to work here. Start at the bottom, see what really goes on. I won't tell anyone who I am. Just let me do this. Jacob hesitated. You don't know what you're asking for. I know exactly what I'm asking for, Emily said. Unless you're afraid I'll uncover something you don't want to see. Her words hung in the air like a challenge. Jacob finally nodded. Fine. But don't expect any special treatment. Emily's first shift began at the front desk. Amanda, who had clearly been briefed to keep her behavior in check, handed Emily a crisp uniform. "Try not to embarrass us," she said with a forced smile. Emily smirked. "I'll do my best." Her tasks were mundane, checking in guests, answering phones, and directing inquiries. But it didn't take long for her to see the cracks in the hotel's pristine facade. Staff whispered about unfair workloads, guests complained about overcharges, and the air reeked of silent desperation. One particularly tense moment came when a harried housekeeper named Rosa approached Amanda, nervously clutching a cleaning schedule. "I can't do all these rooms in one shift," Rosa said, her voice trembling. "It's too much." Amanda's response was icy. "Then maybe you're not cut out for this job." Emily watched, her fists clenched, as Rosa retreated, tears brimming in her eyes. It was the same dynamic she had experienced at the front desk, only now it was clear that Amanda's cruelty extended far beyond her. By the end of her first week, Emily had earned the trust of several staff members, including Rosa and a young bellboy named Daniel. She listened to their stories of mistreatment, long hours, and low pay. Slowly, a plan began to form in her mind. Late one night, she gathered a small group in the break room. "This place needs to change," she said. "But we can't do it alone." Rosa looked skeptical. "What can we do?" "They'll fire us if we speak out." "They won't fire all of us," Emily said. "We need to stand together, expose what's really going on here." Daniel nodded. "But how do we do that?" Emily smiled, a spark of determination in her eyes. "Leave that to me." Emily spent the next few weeks gathering evidence. Photos of unsafe working conditions, recordings of Amanda's verbal abuse, and testimonies from staff. She even managed to capture video footage of a high-ranking manager skimming money from the hotel's accounts. With everything compiled, she approached her father. This time, she didn't ask for permission. She demanded action. "Emily, this could ruin us," Jacob said, his face pale as he reviewed the evidence. "Or it could save us," she countered. "You always taught me to fight for what's right. Now's your chance to prove you meant it." Jacob's gaze softened. For the first time, he saw not just his daughter but a fierce, determined woman standing before him. "All right," he said. "Let's do this." What followed was a storm of media attention. Emily and Jacob held a press conference, exposing the corruption and pledging to rebuild the Sapphire Crest as a place of integrity. Amanda and the corrupt manager were fired, and the staff received better pay and treatment. The journey wasn't easy, and the road ahead was long. But as Emily stood in the lobby, watching Rosa smile for the first time in weeks, she knew it had all been worth it. The Sapphire Crest Hotel had always been a beacon of luxury, but now it was on the verge of becoming something far greater, a symbol of transformation. Emily's actions had sparked a revolution, both within the hotel and beyond its glittering walls. But as the dust settled, the real work began. The hotel's reputation hung by a thread, and both Emily and her father knew they had to rebuild not just its image, but its very foundation. Emily sat in the newly renovated break room with Rosa, Daniel, and a few other staff members. The atmosphere was tense, but it carried a sense of hope. Jacob entered the room, looking uncharacteristically humble. "Thank you all for coming," he began. "I know the past few months have been hard, harder than they should have been. And for that, I take full responsibility." The staff exchanged wary glances. Jacob continued, "This hotel was my dream, but somewhere along the way, I lost sight of what really matters, the people who make it all possible. That changes today. Starting now, every decision we make will prioritize fairness, respect, and dignity for everyone here." Emily watched her father closely. His voice lacked its usual commanding tone, replaced instead with genuine regret. She felt a pang of something she hadn't expected, pride. Daniel raised a hand hesitantly. "What about the pay cuts we've been dealing with? And the impossible schedules?" Jacob nodded. "Those were wrong and we're fixing them. Effective immediately, wages will be increased to a fair rate, and scheduling will be adjusted to ensure no one is overworked." Rosa spoke up, her voice trembling. "And Amanda? Will there be more people like her?" Emily stepped in. That's why we're establishing a staff council, so you all have a voice in how things are run. If there's ever another Amanda, you'll have the power to hold them accountable. The room buzzed with cautious optimism. Emily didn't stop there. She worked tirelessly alongside Jacob to implement changes. They partnered with local organizations to ensure fair hiring practices and launched an employee wellness program. Weekly staff meetings became a norm, giving everyone a platform to voice their concerns and suggestions. The transformation wasn't just internal. Guests began to notice the changes too. The staff were more relaxed, their smiles genuine. Reviews poured in, praising not just the hotel's luxury, but the warmth and hospitality of its employees. Meanwhile, Amanda's story took a darker turn. After being fired, she attempted to sue the hotel for wrongful termination, but Emily's mountain of evidence crushed her claims. Her reputation in the hospitality industry was ruined, and she struggled to find work. One day, Emily spotted Amanda outside a coffee shop, looking disheveled and defeated. Against her better judgment, Emily approached her. "Amanda," she said softly. Amanda looked up, her eyes narrowing. "What do you want? Come to gloat?" "No," Emily replied. "I came to see if you're okay." Amanda laughed bitterly. "Do I look okay?" Emily hesitated. "You made some bad choices, but that doesn't mean you can't start over. Everyone deserves a second chance. If they're willing to change." Amanda's expression softened, but she quickly masked it with a scoff. "Spare me your pity," Emily sighed, handing her a card. "If you ever decide you want help, call me." As she walked away, Emily couldn't help but wonder if Amanda would ever take her up on the offer. Months later, the Sapphire Crest held its grand reopening. The event was a spectacle, with glittering lights, a red carpet, and a guest list filled with influential figures. But for Emily, the real highlight was seeing the staff, dressed to the nines, laughing and mingling with the guests, their confidence radiating. Jacob took the stage to give a speech, but instead of addressing the crowd, he turned to Emily. "This hotel is more than just a business. It's a legacy. And tonight, I want to recognize the person who reminded me what that legacy should stand for. Emily, thank you for showing me what true leadership looks like." The crowd erupted into applause, but Emily's focus was on the faces of the staff. Their smiles were all the recognition she needed. In the weeks that followed, Emily considered her next steps. The Sapphire Crest was thriving, but her work there felt complete. One evening, Jacob found her sitting on the balcony of the suite she had once checked into under such different circumstances. "You're leaving, aren't you?" he asked. Emily nodded. "There's so much more I want to do." This was just the beginning. Jacob smiled, a rare warmth in his eyes. "Wherever you go, you'll make a difference." "I'm proud of you, Emily." For the first time in years, Emily felt the weight of their complicated history lift. "Thanks, Dad." As Emily packed her bags, she looked around the room one last time. The Sapphire Crest had been a battleground, a classroom, and a home. It had changed her as much as she had changed it. With one final glance at the hotel's glowing facade, Emily stepped into the waiting cab, ready to take on whatever challenge came next. Because if there was one thing she had learned, it was that true change always starts with one person daring to take a stand.
The sound of the engine sputtering to a halt sent a jolt through Claire's chest. The car lurched to a stop on the desolate stretch of country road, and for a moment, all that could be heard was the soft hum of the engine winding down and the distant call of birds. The sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows across the empty road. Claire sighed, gripping the steering wheel, frustration flooding her senses. She had been driving for hours, stuck in the endless open fields and narrow roads of the countryside. The city life seemed like a distant memory now, but what was supposed to be a quiet retreat had turned into a nightmare. The last thing she needed was to be stuck on a road that looked as though it had been abandoned for decades, with no cell service and no sign of civilization for miles. Her car had just given up on her, refusing to start no matter how many times she turned the key. Claire opened the door, the heat from the car hitting her as she stepped out. She looked around, her heart pounding. It was starting to get late, and she had no idea how long it would take to get someone to help. Her eyes darted across the landscape, hoping to see something, a house, a farm, anything. But there was nothing for miles except fields stretching out in every direction. Then she spotted it, a small barn in the distance, barely visible through the tall grass. She felt a flicker of hope. Maybe someone there could help her. She started walking towards the barn, her mind racing with possibilities. Was it a farm? Would the owner be kind enough to help a stranger stranded on the side of the road? She quickened her pace, her feet kicking up dust as she made her way toward the barn. The sky had begun to turn an ominous shade of gray, and the weight of the silence pressed in on her. She couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. The place felt off like an old forgotten world stuck in time. She hesitated for a moment before pushing open the weathered door of the barn. Inside, the barn was dark, musty, and filled with the smell of hay and old wood. The faint sound of rustling echoed around her as her eyes adjusted to the dim light. Claire stepped further into the barn, trying to shake the unease that had settled in her chest. She had expected to find a farmer or someone working, but the place seemed deserted. Yet, the barn looked well kept, too well kept for a place that seemed so remote. Her eyes scanned the interior, but there was no sign of life. She stepped back toward the entrance, ready to turn around and look for another option when a voice echoed from the far corner of the barn. Well, what have we got here? Claire froze, her heart racing. She turned toward the voice, spotting a tall, broad-shouldered man standing near a stack of hay bales, his arms crossed over his chest. He was dressed in a worn plaid shirt and faded jeans, his boots covered in dust from working in the fields. I'm sorry to bother you, Claire stammered, trying to mask the nervousness creeping into her voice. My car broke down on the road outside. I was hoping you might be able to help me. The man didn't respond right away. Instead, he stepped forward slowly, his eyes narrowing as he examined her. There was something about his gaze that made her feel uneasy. It wasn't exactly hostile, but it wasn't friendly either. You've got guts, walking into a stranger's barn like this, he said, his voice low and gravelly. Most people wouldn't come this far. I didn't have much of a choice, Claire said, her voice shaking slightly. I'm just looking for help. My car won't start, and I can't get a signal to call anyone. The man seemed to soften a little, but the tension in his stance didn't completely dissipate. You're lucky you found me. The nearest town's an hour's drive in the other direction. Looks like your car's a goner, then. Claire nodded, relief and anxiety warring in her chest. I don't know what to do. I don't even know where I am. It's just me out here, and I don't want to be stranded here alone. The man studied her for a moment longer, and for a second, Claire could have sworn she saw something flicker in his eyes. Something unreadable, dangerous even. But then, just as quickly, it was gone. All right, he said, nodding toward the far side of the barn. I've got a phone in the house. Come on, let's get you sorted out. Claire followed the man out of the barn, her footsteps hesitant. There was something about this whole situation that didn't sit right with her, but she pushed it aside. He was offering to help, and she was grateful for that. As they made their way to the farmhouse, Claire couldn't help but notice the way the man moved. Quietly, confidently, like someone used to being alone. Someone who wasn't afraid of being left in the middle of nowhere. The farmhouse was old, but it was well maintained. The garden was neat, the windows were clean, and there was a sense of care that couldn't be ignored. But the silence of the place felt strange. There were no animals, no sign of any other people. Just the man, his presence dominating the landscape like he was the only one who mattered out here. Who are you? Claire asked before she could stop herself. I mean, I know you're a farmer, but where are your family? The man's eyes flicked over to her, and for a second, the tension in his jaw tightened. He opened the door to the farmhouse without answering her question, stepping aside to let her in. Come inside. I'll get the phone, he said, his tone a little more guarded now. Claire stepped inside, cautiously looking around. The interior was rustic but cozy. There was a fire burning in the hearth, and the room was lit by the warm glow of old-fashioned lamps. It looked like the kind of home that had been built with years of hard work, a place that had seen its fair share of history. As the man turned toward the kitchen, Claire's eyes lingered on a large framed photo hanging on the wall. It showed a woman and two children, smiling, happy together. The family portrait looked old, but there was a sharp sadness in the eyes of the people in the photo. Claire didn't know why, but it sent a chill down her spine. The man returned with the phone, but as he handed it to her, he hesitated. "There's something I should tell you," he said, his voice quieter than before. "You're not the first person to end up here." Claire raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" The man looked at her, his face suddenly stern. "People come out here looking for help, but not everyone leaves. Some of them don't make it." A knot twisted in Claire's stomach. What was he saying? Before she could respond, the man's expression softened, and he handed her the phone. "Just a joke," he said, his tone light now. "Don't take it seriously. Go ahead and make your call. I'll be right here." Claire tried to call for help, but the phone screen flickered. Her stomach churned. Something was wrong. She looked at the man, who was now standing a few feet away, watching her with a quiet intensity. "Something's wrong," she muttered, frustration rising. "I can't get a signal." The man smiled, a slow, deliberate smile that didn't reach his eyes. "It's an old phone," he said. "Not much service out here." Claire's nerves were on edge, but she didn't want to jump to conclusions. Still, the feeling that something was very wrong began to grow. She couldn't shake the chill running down her spine. The unease she'd felt the moment she entered the barn was back, but now it was more palpable, more dangerous. Suddenly, Claire's eyes fell on a small, dusty journal on the counter beside her. It looked old, worn, and out of place. Without thinking, she reached for it. When she opened the first page, she froze. The entries were dated years ago. They described a man, someone who had helped stranded travelers, someone who had taken them in, made them comfortable, and then, without fail, they were never heard from again. The last entry was chilling. "Another one is here, just like the others. They'll never leave." Claire's blood ran cold. She looked up at the man, who was still standing there, watching her closely. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice shaking. The man didn't answer right away. Instead, his smile deepened. "You don't know, do you?" A chill ran through Claire as she backed away, the journal still in her hands. The pieces were starting to fall into place, but it was too late. The door slammed shut behind her. Claire's mind raced as she stared at the man. No, the monster, who had been hiding behind the facade of kindness. Her hands trembled as she clutched the journal in her grasp. The words, so innocently written at first, now felt like a death sentence. "Another one is here, just like the others. They'll never leave." Her breath caught in her throat as the realization hit her hard. The man took a step forward, his smile never fading. "You should have listened when I told you to go inside," he said softly, almost as if talking to a child who had misbehaved. "But it's too late now. You've seen too much." Claire's heart pounded in her chest. Her instincts screamed at her to run, to get out of there, but her feet were frozen to the floor. The door slammed shut behind her, the sound echoing through the quiet farmhouse. The silence that followed was suffocating. Her gaze darted around the room, searching for any means of escape, but the windows were sealed tight, and the only way out was through the man blocking her path. "Why are you doing this?" Claire whispered, her voice barely audible. "Why?" The man's expression softened just a fraction, as if he was considering her question, but then his smile returned, cold, unfeeling. "It's not about what I want. It's about what has to be done. There are rules, you see, and once you've come this far, you're a part of this place now. It's just how it works." Claire's stomach twisted in fear. The journal's words, "They'll never leave," haunted her. She wasn't going to be the next one to disappear. She couldn't let herself become just another forgotten soul in this forsaken place. But how could she fight against a man who seemed to have control over everything here? How could she escape when every path led to him? You're insane." Claire spat, her fear boiling into anger. "You think you could just trap people here? I won't let you." The man's gaze sharpened, and his smile twisted into something darker. "You don't have a choice. The only way out is death, or becoming one of us." The words hit Claire like a punch to the gut. Becoming one of us. She knew then that the man wasn't just talking about letting her go. He was talking about turning her into something else. Something twisted, something wrong. She had seen the way he looked at her, the way he had studied her when she first entered his barn. It wasn't just curiosity. He had been sizing her up, deciding her fate. Claire felt her throat tighten. I won't be like the others. I won't stay here with you. Without thinking, she hurled the journal at him, the weight of her fear and fury making her act on pure instinct. But the man simply stepped back, his expression unchanged as the journal flew past him. He wasn't fazed by her outburst. He had long since stopped seeing people like Claire as anything more than pawns in a twisted game. Why fight it, Claire? He said softly, stepping closer to her. You've seen how it goes. You're going to stay here. You'll live here for as long as you can stand it. And when you break, I'll turn you. It's inevitable. Everyone does. Her breath was ragged now, her chest rising and falling in panic. She wanted to scream, to fight, but what could she do against someone who had the power to control this place, this nightmare? Let me go, she begged, her voice cracking with desperation. Please, I don't want to be here. Just let me leave. The man shook his head slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. It's already too late for that. You should have stayed away. But now, you're just like the others, lost in the dark. Suddenly, a flash of movement caught Claire's eye. She whipped her head toward the window, her heart leaping in her chest. A car. For the briefest moment, she saw headlights in the distance, just a glimmer of hope, a lifeline. Someone else was out there. Someone else who could help her. Claire's heart skipped a beat. She couldn't wait another moment. She had to act, and she had to act fast. Without another word, Claire bolted toward the back door. She knew it was risky, but she had to try. She had seen the man's twisted obsession, and she wasn't about to let him make her another casualty in his cruel game. She yanked at the door, her hands shaking as she tried to push it open. It was stuck. No, no, no. She pulled harder, using every ounce of strength left in her. She wasn't going to let him take her without a fight. The door creaked open just enough for her to squeeze through, and she pushed her way out into the night air, gasping for breath. Her legs were shaky, but the sight of the headlights, so close now, gave her the energy to run. She sprinted toward the car, hearing footsteps behind her, loud, fast. The man was coming after her. Help! Help! Claire screamed, her voice raw with fear and desperation. The car was just a few feet away now. The headlights illuminated the gravel road, and she saw the driver, just a shadow in the driver's seat. The man behind her laughed a low, mocking sound. It's too late, Claire. They won't help you. But Claire didn't stop. She was almost there. The car door opened, and Claire hurled herself inside, slamming it shut just as the man reached her. Drive! She screamed at the driver. The man's face twisted with rage as he pounded on the window. But the driver, a stranger with a look of confusion and concern, didn't hesitate. He slammed his foot on the gas, and they sped off, leaving the farmhouse and the man behind. Claire collapsed back in the seat, her chest heaving with exhaustion. She looked back, half expecting to see the man chasing them. But there was nothing but the empty road stretching out behind them. I don't know who you are, the driver said, glancing over at her with a look of disbelief. But you were running from something serious. Are you all right? Claire looked out the window, her mind racing. She didn't know how to explain what had just happened, what she had just escaped. The fear, the terror, the darkness that had been closing in on her. It was all still fresh in her mind. But for the first time in hours, she felt safe. She was free. I don't know, she whispered, her voice shaky. But I don't think I'll ever be the same. The car sped down the road, leaving the farmhouse behind. Claire's breathing began to slow, and her body, still trembling, started to relax. She glanced over at the driver, who was looking at her with a mixture of concern and curiosity. What happened back there? He asked. Who was that guy? Claire swallowed hard, trying to collect herself. I don't know his name, she said, her voice shaky. But he's been trapping people out there. He's not just some ordinary farmer. He's something else. He's been taking people in, and they never leave. He tried to do the same to me. I think I was just another victim. The driver looked at her in disbelief, his eyes widening. That's crazy. You're lucky you got away. People don't come back from those kinds of places. Not without something changing them. I don't know what he wanted, Claire said, her voice barely above a whisper. But I'm not going back there. Not ever. Not if it means becoming like the others. I won't let him do that to me. The car continued down the road, Claire's mind still spinning with everything that had happened. It felt like a nightmare, one she had barely escaped. But as she looked at the man in the driver's seat, she realized something. She had survived, and no matter what came next, she would never let herself become another lost soul in that forsaken place.